Yeah. I love that description of the exorcism. And I had this moment after I'd heard Chris's story of thinking back to when I was a child, and there used to be a billboard up when I was a child growing up in DC with a picture of a fried egg on it. Do you remember this? And a slogan that said, "This is your brain on drugs." Yes, you know it, right? So I'm thinking that perhaps outside of the woods and Chris's stories, perhaps there should be a billboard with an egg in a jar and the slogan that says, "This is your brain on Mal-Ire." Just some sort of preparation. Thanks for that story, Chris. I've heard this story before. Yes, I've heard this before at Story Collider, which is a science-themed story event that happened here in Ann Arbor. And I'm really happy that we could have it be part of our program tonight. I love the interplay between the scientific, rational mind and the cultural beliefs that aren't necessarily steeped in science. And our next storyteller will address the same theme, but from the other side of the world. Will Weber loves birding, especially hawk watching, especially on fall days with a strong, cold north wind. We're getting there. Yeah, not today, but yesterday maybe. His favorite moment of travel? Every time I see the snowy Himalayan peaks in the morning light. Can you just picture that? Will is not only the co-founder of Journeys. Over the last several months where I've had the opportunity and the privilege to work with Will, I've learned that he is actually just a really great guy. Can I also please welcome to the stage Will Weber? Now watch this.
That's good. All right. I think we got it. Thank you, Elsa. I'm going to tell you a story, but I can't resist taking a moment and feeling the pleasure of seeing so many people with whom I've shared so many trips and so much planning, so much happiness. Thank you all for being fans of Journeys all these years. 43 years ago, I joined the Peace Corps, and after a couple months training in California, I was assigned to be a high school math and science teacher in a Brahmin village in a remote corner of Nepal. I think it was the last most remote high school without very much in the way of teaching expertise. It was 3.5 days walk from the nearest airstrip to my village, and I was the first volunteer there. And with each step I took up over the steepest mountains I had ever hiked up and down the steepest valleys several times, I could feel myself going farther back in time. And I was excited about this, no question. When I finally arrived at my village, it was a strange experience because it was kind of expected. Someone had made a request some months ago, but in Nepal then, there was a big difference between news and rumor and fantasy, and expectations often didn't really lead to results. But there I was, not very much expected, but in a really wonderful village. In some ways, it was really a fantasy itself for me. It was, in today's terms, sustainable, organic, self-sufficient. Most of the people there had really never been very far beyond the village because they didn't have to be. And it was a nearly pure Brahmin village. Brahmins are, many of you know from your travels with Journeys, the highest caste in Hindu society, and the priest caste. And in this village, it wasn't just about religion. Hinduism was culture and lifestyle and just the way people thought about the world. And most people were illiterate, and so in a way the gods of the Hindu pantheon, Hindu mythology really lived there in the village. And I was the next strangest thing to walk in. Peace Corps had given us a lot of instruction about what to expect that in some ways helped us. They told us, for example, that we shouldn't really reveal all the things that we might have brought to the village. If you had a radio, people were going to want to borrow that. If you had a camera, you'd be expected to take pictures. Don't really tell them you were making $30 a month because you might be in the loan business. Above all else, you probably shouldn't really share your medical kit or talk about that. You're there to teach, not be a doctor. You'll see people in need, but remember to focus. And they warned us about involvement with women. That wasn't too big a fear, though, because the women wouldn't come close, and I was willing to accept all of this. But when I arrived, unexpected, being as tall as I am, and most of the people were kind of topping out around here, there was no place really for me to live comfortably. I began to develop a kind of permanent mark here, right on my forehead. And the other problem was, as Brahmins, they were uncomfortable with a non-Brahmin living in their household. Again, lots of strict rules here, and I was trying to go along with them, but I ended up having to live in quite public places. And then I discovered what was really the most serious problem I had to deal with, and that was there was no conception of privacy, but a very strong curiosity. And so all these notions about keeping things private and not letting people know, it was gone. Wherever I went, people would follow me. I would be sleeping in a room in the school or somebody's a goat shed that had been made up very nicely as accommodation for me, but again, I'd wake up and there would be kids just waiting for me to wake up, not with questions, just curious to see what this guy does when he, wakes up. Well, the situation really did become intolerable. My feelings of gratitude and appreciation were somewhat diminishing between the bumps on the head and the lack of privacy. I talked to my headmaster about it, and he, as nice a guy as he was, he couldn't appreciate it. He would say, wow, you should really feel proud that people want to watch you. Look at us. Nobody's nobody's looking at us. So between working it out with the Peace Corps and working it out with my headmaster, we agreed that, okay, I could get a house that I could stand up in, and it would have a door that would close, and I would solve my problem. But they wanted me to live right next to the school where the two paths through the village crossed, and people could have even more access to me. Well, I scoped the situation in this time, situation out, and I said, speaking of shamans, there was a shaman who lived up the hill, very powerful, respected, revered shaman that everybody feared. And it also happened that he lived near the biggest spring in the village, and I was sick a lot. I had every kind of parasite, 2 kinds of dysentery, various things that have never reached the American shores. I was sick a lot, and it was partly because I could never really guarantee that water be boiled. I mean, the notion of boiling water before you drink it, that wasn't part of Hindu custom at all. So I got this beautiful house built up on a village, and this was my view, actually. I measured when dawn came by seeing the first rays of sunlight on Mount Everest, which was right out there. I looked down at soaring eagles and vultures below me in the village, and things were really going well. I had really turned the situation around. I was happy. Until one day, there was a knock on my door before dawn. I opened the door, no light on Everest. Here's 2 little kids standing there, barefoot, kind of dirty clothes, huffing, puffing. It's this early in the morning to come up this very steep trail up to my little house way up on a cliff. Something was going on. Come, in translation, come quick, you must come or she will die. And I had gained a certain self-confidence about, how I could move and what rules I could break and things at this point because things had gotten easier. But still, this notion of getting involved in some kind of medical treatment just seemed a little uncomfortable. But they convinced me, they wouldn't be here if there weren't a serious situation. And I had the confidence of people in the village now. So I went down the hill, and these kids, they just ran down this rocky slope barefoot like I never, ever learned to do. I made my way down, and they led me into a part of the village I had never visited, way down near the edge of the jungle at the bottom of the gorge. It was quite a long walk down. And it was kind of a strange scene coming to this house. And there were some people out it was still dark, but there was a little light. I could see some people out in the periphery of the village. It's steep rice terraces all the way up, so as far as you could see into the forest. And this house had steep terraces next to it, and there were people there. They said, in there, and they just sort of pushed me inside. And there was a single kerosene candle and a little fire burning, and a woman wrapped in sort of dirty clothes lying by the fireplace. And there were two women on the side who I quickly learned were midwives. And the story was this woman, Nepali Brahmin woman, had given birth to a child. Child is fine in another household, don't worry about the child. But she had not delivered the afterbirth. And in the tradition of this village, no one could touch this woman. No one could assist her. Now, childbirth is a very difficult process. There's no, in these villages, no anesthetic. Really, the nearest doctor was 6 or 8 days walk away. There was no prospect of bringing someone in who had a modern medical training, and no one in the village would touch her. There was absolute sense of uncleanliness that could be transmitted. And some people said, well, it's time and bad spirits are around, and we can hearken back to the other story. There was a similar belief. And the shaman was not in the business of child delivery, so it wasn't an option to talk to him. And he wasn't a Brahmin either. So, it was even worse for a non-Brahmin to touch. But I was outside the caste system. I had been spouting off about science in the classroom. People had heard that, American may have walked on the moon. So I had this sort of aura about me that maybe I could do some things that local people couldn't do. And but I thought, oh, I'm in exactly that situation Peace Corps told me I should never get myself in. I'm not a doctor. I'm a teacher. Here I am, medical situation. The woman is comatose. I knew she was breathing. And so the midwife says, so all you do is you just reach under there and you grab hold of this umbilical cord and you pull it out and you'll be fine. You can go back to your house way up on the hill. And I thought, all right, so I'm bringing science and modern medicine. And boil some water, please. Boil some water. You guys do something over here. So I'm looking at the situation and I decided, well, she's passing away. It's been over a day since she's given birth. So I start to just slide up her sari, her long skirt, and the midwives were enraged. I was going to be violating her privacy and her sanctity. Me and a foreigner touching a woman. It was such an uncomfortable and difficult situation for them and for me, and of course for this woman who didn't know what was going on. I said, no, give me that hot water. Wash my hands here, thinking, okay, maybe this is what you're supposed to do, is get your hands really clean. And so I said, all right, I'll leave it to me. So I slide up, and there I find the umbilical cord, which by this time is shriveled and dried. And, I hadn't seen pictures of childbirth, I guess, and I thought the umbilical cord was pretty thick. You sort of get a good grip on it like this. But this was just a withered thread. And I don't know what the normal tensile strength of umbilical cord is. But I grabbed hold, and they're sort of encouraging me, from the corner over here. And I thought, okay, they say it's going to be easy. And I pull, and it wasn't coming. I pull a little stronger, and it stretched, and then snapped, and it all went back in, and there was nothing. All right, here it is. Peace Corps said, all right, what might happen if you get involved is you'll make the situation worse, and now you're going to be responsible for what happened. Right? And here it was. I was at the second degree. I made it worse. I shouldn't have been involved. I did get involved. Now it's worse. Well, and they said, and she might die, and then if you're not blamed, at least you're going to feel really guilty about this. Or if you're successful, you're the new placenta guy in town. So, but here it was. It was a matter of life and death, and nobody else would touch her. So I thought, okay, let's go after that umbilical cord. So big hand, little woman, oh, geez, just awful. All right. So I reached in, and a little ways in, I thought, okay, I'll find something. I felt something, and I sort of what does the placenta feel like? Any of you? I pulled, and there was a groan, and she's still alive, but nothing came out. I let go again. All right, got to go in farther. Reach in, all right, sort of squishy, membranous. Okay, and I got a hold, got my fingers around it, and I pulled it remarkably easy. I was able to pull it out, and there was this gasp of everybody in the room, including me. Out comes this slushy mess, foul-smelling, but the midwives were greatly relieved. They just kind of grabbed a hold of me and maybe passed me some of that boiling water to clean up. I was out the door. and they're going to take over because they didn't have to touch her now. I had done the dirty work. Okay. So I come out, and, to this day, 42 or 43 years later, I can still remember coming out that door and looking up and seeing that now the light was on the mountains, but now on the terraces all around the village, there was dozens of people sitting and all looking at me expressionless and not really knowing how to comprehend what had happened, because I had performed a deed which they would nobody, obviously. Women die in this village, in these villages all the time, because no one would do what I did. And I didn't know. I wanted to be angry in a way, but I just couldn't say anything. And they weren't speaking to me. Normally, these very friendly people who would always be welcoming me, namaste, namaste. And so I just went up to my house and had breakfast and got ready for school. It's like I'm back in the normal routine, like this almost didn't happen. The village life went on. I went back down to the school, which was a long ways down because I was living in this beautiful place. And so normally people would see me coming down the hill to school, all the students, little kids, big kids. And as they'd see me approaching the school, they would come running up to me. And they'd go, namaskar, namaskar, stand on their tiptoes, the namaste thing. But to show more honor, you reach higher and higher and you say namaskar. And they would shout it at me, and it was embarrassing to me. And the teachers would all laugh because, they would be lucky to get a one-hand namaste. But on this occasion, nothing. Just everybody stood still and watched me walk into the schoolyard. And I thought, oh, it's over. My celebrity status is just blown away here. But I walked into the teacher's office, and one of the teachers, they were really more together. They understood what science was about. They understood their own limitations, and they appreciated what I did. They said, you did a wonderful thing. You saved that woman. She would have died. And I heard that again and again from people. And, of course I felt better. And eventually the family of the woman who lived sent me, as gratitude, there's very little money passed in this village, they sent me 2 huge 10-kilogram chunks of raw sugar, which is what they produced for trading for other goods in the village, which was clearly a lifetime supply. And people came up and said, that was a wonderful thing, that was a wonderful thing. But then the third element came into play. I was now, Mr. Placenta. And it wasn't but a couple weeks, there's another knock on the door. People from a village about 4 hours away came and said, hey, you remember what you did? It's got the same situation, come quick. And so I did go, but I was able to think it through a little more, and I brought all the women from that village in, and I said, all right, this is the last time I'm going to do this. Everybody watch. There's nothing going to happen, no evil spirits. Nothing's going to happen to you if you do this. And it was a much easier procedure, and things went fine, and I was, again, appreciated in the village. But, to this day, in preparing this story for you, I hadn't really recollected it in a while. I really had to go back and think, what was it? What was so strange about it? How could I describe it as transformation? And it was. And, I wish that they had gotten beyond their culture in order to save a life. And I had to go beyond the rules that had been handed to me in order to do that. And I think as a general principle, it's made me think that perhaps in my own culture, I'm sometimes not doing all I can. I look at people who may be in a difficult situation, and with my means and my knowledge and my University of Michigan education, perhaps there's more that I could do. And it's always useful to remind yourself about that. Thank you.
On track.